a slight joke, and that, which I won't read for public viewers. No, you're very welcome to this discussion, hosted by Unionist Voice, and we're here with the three co-authors of Let's Talk Loyalism's fantastic survey, which they published today, which to take the views of the Unionist and primarily Loyalist community in a survey which I think engaged over 1,020 participants. So it's a fantastic piece of work which they've produced. Let's Talk Loyalism was formed by a number of young and in Stacey's case not so young loyalists.
How dare you?
To give a voice to that demographic, which is often underrepresented in the media, and of course due to social media being dominated as it is by orchestrated national rules, it's very difficult for that voice to come through. So just personally, I would like to say congratulations to you. Let's Talk Loyalism's doing fantastic work. Look forward to working with you in the future on your exciting projects. And as I say, I think what Let's Talk Loyalism does fantastically is use our gateways in terms of empowering people rather than acting as gatekeepers. And I think that's very much to your credit as a group and as individuals. So, Kellie-anne, I suppose to start off, do you want to just give a bit of an overview as to how this came about and maybe some of the key findings?
Yeah, no problem at all. Well, the decision was made to carry out the survey with the objective of assessing the opinion of the Loyalist community on certain topics, which were protocol, policing and politics. We decided that we would have a survey online, and we would take in it 4 main values, and they were going to be confidentiality, so that we don't know who the participants are and how they answered. It would be anonymous, and that the participants would all be identified as loyalists. That was really important. As the objective was to make sure the results came from only the Loyalist community. It's a Loyalist survey, it's engagement. So we had to distribute the survey to groups, certain associations, the Loyal Orders, to gather that information, and that was why it went out to them. The other thing was we felt that one of the main values had to be authenticity, and we wanted the answers to come from the community, for the community that we're speaking on behalf of, and that was very important to us. So the survey was open for, I think it was 6.5 hours, and it had to be closed, maxed out then. So it was and there was 19 questions all in, and we had an about you section so that we could identify how many participants were female, the age group. One of the most important things we thought about was whether participants came from a rural area or an urban area, because people in the city do feel that very different to the countryside. So we took that all into consideration, and it maxed out really quickly. We were really pleased with the amount of participants.
Yeah, that's excellent. I did notice, and I noticed some online commentary, not necessarily critical, but in relation to and this was something, to be fair to you, it's not that somebody needed to point it out critically online, and if anybody was trying to point it out critically, I mean, all they needed to do is actually go and take time to read the document, and this was something that you actually self-identified. That's that there was quite an imbalance in terms of male vis-a-vis female, and I suppose, Stacey, for you as someone who's been and obviously yourself, Kellie-anne, at the forefront of try and encourage and empower more females within the Loyalist community. What's your thoughts on that, Stacey? Or do you want to say a wee bit about that balance?
It's obviously regrettable that we didn't get more female input, but again, I don't think any of us were expecting how quickly that this really took off. And as Kellie-anne had said, we had to close it within 6 hours. I'm really watching the results coming in, noticing that obviously that the female representation was really, really low. We did try and claw that back a bit, but again, going forward, I think young people and women in particular, we're really going to try and target and get their views. That's not to say that the women and Loyalist communities don't feel the same as the people who took part in this survey, though.
Yeah. Just before we move on then to discussing some of the very significant findings within your survey, Muir, do you just, especially given the day that's in it, in terms of Lucid Talks poll and obviously this morning they had a difficult time unknown, do you want to say just a little bit about in terms of the methodology and in terms of authenticity? Because I think as Kellie-anne said, I mean, this was directed at the Loyalist community. It was for the Loyalist community. That it is what it says on the tin. It doesn't purport to be a representative survey of the whole community. It purports to be a Loyalist survey, and I think the way that you designed it in such a way that it would be targeted and sent into those specific communities. But do you want to just expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, Kellie-anne hit the nail on the head. Let's Talk Loyalism was born from the ambition to be a vehicle through which loyalists can have their voice heard. And I think that's been very much the heartbeat of the survey. It's about engaging loyalists. And that is a difficult task because, how do you differentiate between a unionist and a loyalist, and how do you go about distributing the survey, which primarily focuses on the loyalist community? And the way that we tried to navigate our way through that was, as members of the Loyalist community ourselves, was to distribute this survey, the online details of this survey, when it was launched to individuals and groups within the Loyalist community. So that meant that the survey was circulated around sports organisations within the Loyalist community, cultural organisations within the Loyalist community, historical organisations within the Loyalist community. So as to try and ensure there was a breadth of input there, but as Kellie-anne and Stacey have rightly mentioned, the fact that the survey isn't weighted and that it was only open for a short period of time meant that regrettably there are some imbalances when it comes to female input, when it comes to young persons input, and they're just things that we'll own up to front and center and try to improve on going forward, and use that and try to prioritize those specific identity categories in future consultative exercises.
Yeah, well, I think actually just to take up the point you make a little bit, let's talk loyalism, as you say, from what I ascertain, and certainly the evidence as to what you have done so far is about acting as a gateway, is about identifying those lacunas and gaps in engagement. So I think actually your survey has served two purposes. Not only has it actually zoned in on the issues which you have asked the questions of and produced the findings on, but actually it has assisted you in being able to identify the gaps in participation and engagement, which you can then focus in going forward. So I actually think your survey is a very powerful tool in terms of saying, well, let's try and engage more with this particular section of loyalism, which is missing. So I don't think that's necessarily a criticism or something you need to improve on. I think more that, from my view, I don't think there's anything you could be critical of you in terms of your survey, because I don't remember anything of this type being done at such a grassroots level. But moving on to some of the findings, I suppose, Kellie-anne, do you want to summarize some of the findings, and then Muir, do you want to say, maybe Kellie-anne, if you do a little bit on politics, and then Muir, maybe if you want to do policing the protocol, and if you want to comment really on other findings, Stacey, just happy enough for that. Yeah, go ahead, Kellie-anne. You're in the hot seat.
I know.
Going through the report as we speak.
I know. Just give me a second. To be fair, there's a lot of results.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just jump in on the policing. So obviously there was 19 questions in the survey. 4 of those questions were regarding policing. The 4 questions were divided into 2 subcategories, if you will. The first subcategory was loyalist perspectives on how the PSNI treat the loyalist and the Republican community. And the second subcategory was on the PSNI's handling of the Bobby Story funeral and the Chief Constable's position. So those findings, I think, are quite significant. And for a long time within the Loyalist community, people have alleged of two-tier policing. And when you look at what two-tier policing and that allegation actually is, you see that it is double-sided. It's a double-edged sword, if you will. People will allege that not just is the Loyalist community treated unfairly, but the Republican community is treated preferentially. And that's something that's definitely comes through in an overwhelming fashion in the survey questions. Through the survey, Loyalists were asked if they believe that the PSNI discriminate and treat the Loyalist community unfairly. And 93% of respondents answered yes to that question. The other question after that was about the Republican community, and they were asked that is the Republican community given preferential treatment by the PSNI? And again, a similar substantial majority, in that 95% of Loyalist respondents said that the Republican community is given preferential treatment. And I suppose off the back of the Bobby Story funeral, which the next question deals with straight on, it is in some ways, and Stacey and I were talking about this before we spoke to you, Jamie, and this is representative of a lot of the questions. It is unsurprising.
Meetings before meetings.
Yes.
Yes. Sure, but
preparatory conversations, we'll call them.
You are acting like gatekeepers here in this discussion.
Calm yourself. Yeah, but those results are in some way confirmatory of what many of us would have, presumed off the back of the Bobby Story funeral and of many criticisms that have been made for the past number of years since the inception of the PSNI, that there is, on one hand, a pattern of passivism from the PSNI to the Republican community, Bobby Story's funeral being the prime example of that, and an INLA show of strength being another example of that, you could argue. And then this sort of, overly aggressive treatment of the Loyalist community, whether you agree with that or whether you don't. 93% of Loyalists believe they are the community is discriminated by the PSNI, and 95% believe the Republican community is given preferential treatment. The second subcategory of the policing results pertains to the Chief Constable's position. After the PPS publication that they were not going to take legal action against Sinn Féin representatives who were attending Bobby Story's funeral, the entire political unionism sung off the same hymn sheet, demanding the Chief Constable's resignation. I think Arlene Foster called it at the time a crisis in confidence in the PSNI. Well, it seems that, as many months on that it's been from the PPS publication and over a year since the Bobby Story funeral, Loyalists are still seeking and demanding the Chief Constable's resignation. So that sort of determinism that his position is untenable hasn't been affected by the time spent, if you will, since that. And if I just get up the figure, it was 92% of Loyalist respondents believe the Chief Constable should resign. So all in the 90s, their confidence is significantly damaged in the PSNI. Loyalists believe the Chief Constable should resign. 93% of Loyalists believe that the community is discriminated by the PSNI, and 95% believe the Republican community receive preferential treatment. That's a summary of the results from the policing section.
I suppose then just if we stay on policing at this point in time, and obviously because the female demographic was underrepresented, and Stacey and Kellie-anne, I mean, coming from a Loyalist community as women in the Loyalist community, is it not a fair point to say that actually when you look at the dismantling of the RUC, the basis of that proposition was that the nationalist community could not support the RUC, so the RUC had to go. I mean, is it not fair to say that here we have now a police service which quite plainly does not command the support of the Loyalist community, but actually the elected representatives of unionism have indicated a lack of confidence in the policing? I mean, is it not time for, at the very least, significant reform of the PSNI, if not actually, maybe not go as far as I would go in terms of disbanding it completely, but what's your views on that? If maybe you want to go first, Stacey, and then Kellie-anne, you want to come in with a bit on that?
I mean, I think in terms of the Loyalist community,
Stacey Graham.
I don't know what's about to come there, but it sounded very good. We're all waiting in suspense here.
Stacey's having technical difficulties in deciding whether the PSNI should disband or not. So while Stacey's considering that fine proposition, Kellie-anne, do you want to continue on?
Well, I mean, yeah, what I was just going to say was, from the Bobby Story funeral, Loyalist confidence in policing has never been lower. I can't believe that the Chief Constable has been able to retain his position. I find that incredibly shocking. I don't know why he's still in the position. And they really do need a major reform. But I don't know that disbanding it might be a bit far, I think, for some Loyalists. So it might,
I'm always on
extreme view. But
dreams. This is a problem, Kellie-anne, because now that the majority of Loyalists have moved into this anti-agreement, I mean, people like me and Jim Allister now have to become more extreme, so we have to push it a bit further.
Yeah, well, no, I agree, but I definitely don't think that the Chief Constable should have retained his position. That's just my opinion. I can't understand why it hasn't been pushed more. I don't know what the reluctance is there to, with the policing board and everything. I can't work out why he's still being allowed. I don't know whether it's going back to politics, but whether or not from that point of view, is that more to do with it than we're being led to believe? I don't know. But I would get rid of him.
Yeah, no, fair point. Well, look.
Yeah, I mean, just to come in on that as well. Kellie-anne makes a good point that there was a huge amount of political attention that was aimed and criticism that was aimed toward the Chief Constable, and we have seen that sort of dissipate and die down, and it's almost like it's just been slid under the carpet. What's interesting about this survey, which demonstrates that it may have been slid under the carpet for politicians and in terms of the things that they're saying, but it's still very much the feeling and sentiment within the Loyalist community, and that presents a real challenge for our police service, and particularly for our Chief Constable, who, if he wants to remain, or if he's the power to remain in his position, going forward in terms of recovering that confidence in the Loyalist community. I think I do remember him making a statement about how he realises that he needs to regain confidence within the Loyalist community. It's clear that if that is an ambition of his, that he's failing.
Yeah, I don't think any of us who live and work in Loyalist communities are in any way shocked or surprised by the numbers in terms of the feeling towards the police. I mean, everybody hears it day and daily. The only people who'll be surprised at it is probably the SNI themselves, who persistently have the fingers in their ears. But what's notable is, I mean, they had a difficulty with the Black Lives Matter protesters. That particular community, they felt that was disengaged in policing, and they set up a task force, not the paramilitary crime task force, I may add, a task force focused on positive engagement. And I mean, as I know I said it flippantly there, but I mean, the only task force the Loyalists have is a paramilitary crime task force. I mean, what about a task force to engage positively with the Loyalist community? But I'm anxious, obviously, there's a lot to cover here in a short period of time. So we'll move on now to, I suppose, Kellie-anne, do you want to do a bit of an overview on the political findings?
Yeah. The first question in the political section.
Sorry. Somebody just try and message Stacey in case she's trying to get back.
She asked me there, can you hear me?
Definitely not now. She's been evicted. But
right.
If she tries to get in on the link again, we can let her back in. Sorry, go ahead, Kellie-anne.
No, the first question in the politics section just covered who did you vote for, your first preference the last election, and then following on from that, it was if there was an election tomorrow, who would you vote for? So obviously, I mean, this is one of the biggest findings from the report. I don't think it's any surprise to anyone that the DUP, the change in that was unbelievable. TUV, it went really up. You know, it became the most popular party, receiving 50% of Loyalist first preference votes, which, you know, if you're in the TUV, you obviously take a lot from. Said that the DUP would be second, which I'm kind of surprised at, possibly. And the UUP wasn't far behind in third, receiving 11.9% Loyalist first preference votes. I think one of the big findings in that question too was the increase in the number of people that would vote for a Unionist, Loyalist, Independent. There was, you know, and obviously the worrying thing too, that an increase in the amount of people that will not vote.
There you go, Jamie, if you're thinking of standing.
In terms of the Unionist and Loyalist Independent, though, I think that's indicative that a lot of people feel unrepresented. What?
We're talking about a very important proposition we was putting up, and you just cut it off very quickly. On purpose, no doubt about it.
Kellie-anne mentioned the increased appetite within the Loyalist community for independent candidates there.
Yeah, which would tell me that a lot of people out there don't feel represented by the current political parties.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry to interrupt you, Stacey. What were you saying?
Just that, really.
Well, did you want to add anything on policing, Stacey? Because you got cut off there.
I don't know what happened there. I think in terms of reform for policing, I think top down, bottom up, there really does need to be huge reform. In terms of even recruitment within working class communities, there needs to be proper representation from working class communities. That's across the board, and the PCSPs as well. We need to see Loyalists given seats and voices on PCSPs, and right at the top where the accountability happens and where the PSNI are held to account, we need to see Loyalist representation there, and it's something that we don't often see at all.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important point, and obviously you missed a little bit of discussion there about when you were in terms of the police engagement with loyalism. I mean, the Black Lives Matter community, there was significant engagement, but there wasn't that with the Loyalist community. So that's important. Next section, then, Moore, do you want to take the bit on the protocol and how the protocol should be contested?
Yeah, there was a number of questions pertaining to the protocol. There was 8 questions in total, and those 8 questions could be put into 3 sections, if you will. Loyalist opinion on the Northern Ireland Protocol, what Loyalists believe Unionist leaders should do about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and who Loyalists consider responsible for the Northern Ireland Protocol. So I'll try to briefly summarise those 3 subcategories. In terms of Loyalist opinion of the Northern Ireland Protocol, by far and away the most comprehensive and uniform response to any question was the question about, does the Northern Ireland Protocol threaten Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom? And 98% of Loyalists said that it does threaten Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom, which I think, again, may not be surprising for many, but this whole narrative that's out there that this is an economic problem that we're dealing with, that this is just purely economics, it's an economic arrangement, it's an economic border, it's just economics, isn't really cutting the mustard when it comes to Loyalist mindsets. Loyalists see this, in my opinion, for exactly what it is, and that's a constitutional issue. So Loyalists are certainly, according to this survey, looking at the Northern Ireland Protocol through a constitutional lens, and that's where the majority of apprehensions lie. So that will be interesting going forward in terms of any sort of remedial solutions that are proposed on behalf of the United Kingdom or the European Union, whether actually, even if you deal with some of the economic issues, whether it actually resolves the constitutional threat that the protocol poses. Another interesting result from that Loyalist opinion toward the Northern Ireland Protocol is that the majority, 91% of Loyalist respondents, want the protocol abolished entirely. So when asked, what do you want to see happen to it? Do you want to see amendments? Do you want to see it abolished? Do you want to see it just stay the way it is? 91% want it abolished, whereas 8% would prefer to see amendments to make it tolerable. And that's an interesting division within Loyalist perspectives at the minute. This sort of, what do we do with the protocol? Do we want it gone entirely? wreck the house and build a new one, or are we satisfied with sort of changing the interior of it? And it seems that the dominant mood within the Loyalist community is for the abolition of the protocol, which will be interesting again going forward to see any sort of
just on that particular point, Moore, because I think there's going to be quite a lot in this protocol bit, so it's maybe best if we take it and stage it, so we remember. But there was a particular time which some within Loyalism and even Unionism were talking about significant changes to the protocol, and I mean, I always found that the height of absurdity, because if the protocol is in of itself, you accept the proposition that the protocol is designed to dismantle the union, and it's fundamentally at its core an affront to the active union, then all the significant changes in the world is not going to make any difference. So I think actually the point that you have flushed out here is that it's only a small minority within Loyalism that would countenance any changes to the protocol now, because I mean you can't change something which is so fundamentally flawed that it has to be demolished in its entirety, in my view anyway. And I think that's an interesting observation you make, which obviously comes through in your survey.
Yeah, I don't know if the girls want to comment on that. If anything you want to comment on, far ahead there.
Just to summarise, really, and it's a term that you use all the time. You could dip the protocol in gold, and it still won't be acceptable to the Loyalist community because of the constitutional issue, and solely because of the constitutional issue.
Yeah, and I mean, now I'll give my opinion rather than the survey's opinion, but or what the survey shows. I think it is an issue. I mean, if you have a list of problems with the protocol and they are all resolved in a satisfactory manner, then you've effectively hollowed out all the problems with the protocol. And of course, I would imagine that there will be more, or there would be more of an acceptance of that. But we're yet to see what amendments will be lobbied. And really, if you look at the genesis, the embryonic nature of the protocol, the DNA of it is the division or dismantling of the union. So of course, every Loyalist, or the majority of Loyalists anyway, according to the survey, and like Stacey says, no matter the benefits that people try to sell with the protocol, dip it in gold or whatever, until you resolve those key fundamental issues, then I would imagine the dominant cry from Loyalism would be for its abolition. So Stacey makes a good point.
Do you want to come in on that, Kellie-anne, just before we move on? Or?
No, just agree with that. I mean, I deal with, and where I work with the protocol all the time, moving things, importing, exporting. And it's unsustainable as it is now for business. And, but taking the business aside from it, for me, it's all about the Constitution, and until it's abolished, it's, we're not going to be happy.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So the next I'll move on to the next section in terms of, there's some questions I've missed out there, but for time's sake, in terms of who Loyalists consider responsible for the protocol, this question was phrased in such a way where respondents were asked, who do you consider most responsible for the Northern Protocol? Rank in order from 1 to 5, and the options were the British government, the Irish government, the European Union, those who voted leave, and the DUP. Now, a non-applicable option was provided as well for any respondent who wanted to absolve any of those options of responsibility. But in terms of who ranked the highest, it's clear that the majority of Loyalists consider the British government primarily, although not exclusively, responsible for the Northern Ireland Protocol. Second in that list was the European Union. Third was the Irish government. Fourth was the DUP. And fifth were those who voted to leave the European Union. So that's a sort of.
Just on that, Bird, did you think that just was people not confused in terms of responsibility, ultimately implementing it? Plainly the British government, that's a logical finding. But do you think as well there's a point that we shouldn't confuse that finding with actually the anger for those who manipulated the situation in terms of the protocol? Because I do detect a visceral hatred almost of the Irish government coming from the Unionist and Loyalist community because of their weaponisation of the threat of terrorism and trying to use terrorism to subjugate Northern Ireland within an economic united Ireland. Do you think there's a difference between those two propositions?
Well, in some form, perhaps, yeah. But what I would say is that question bears out. Actually, that many people within the Loyalist community do hold the Irish government in high regard for their, or well, not in high regard, but as definitely not. But having high levels of responsibility for the protocol. So, for example, 15% of Loyalists said the Irish government were actually primarily responsible for the Northern Ireland Protocol, but 70% of respondents include the Irish government within the top 3 most responsible characters for the Northern Ireland Protocol. So yes, the Irish government has become somewhat of a lightning rod within the Loyalist community for criticism because of, in my opinion, the insidious role that they played and an unethical role that they played in creating it. But you can see some of that frustration with the Irish government in some of the other questions. For example, one question was, should political unionism withdraw from North-South ministerial meetings? And a significant amount, 80% or 81% of Loyalists said yes, that they should withdraw from North-South ministerial meetings. And the reason that was given for that was due to the Irish government playing an integral role in creating the Northern Ireland Protocol. So there is frustration there with the Irish government to the tune of 81% of the Loyalist community that want to see full withdrawal from North-South ministerial meetings.
Yep, dead on. Is that the finish on the protocol bit more? Or is there anything else?
I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. That's largely it. The last takeaway that I'd like to give you is actually in terms of, we talked about them subcategories, and I was mentioning there briefly about what Loyalists think Unionist political leaders within unionism should do in response to the protocol, and that one that I cited was about political unionism withdrawing from North-South ministerial meetings. Another interesting response to the survey was that 90% of Loyalist respondents believe that political unionism should perhaps collapse the Northern Ireland Assembly in protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. So that's an interesting result. I'm sure the girls will have something, Stacey and Kellie-anne will have something to say about that. In terms of Loyalist feeling toward the institutions of Northern Ireland, namely the Northern Ireland Assembly, and its intertwined role with the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
I'm just thinking, actually, when you were saying, I'm just looking at the screens here, and there's the 2 boys and 2 girls. Actually, I actually feel as if I've gone all hyper woke, and we actually have gender balance and everything in this discussion. It's absolutely fabulous development. I mean, the Twitterati will be delighted by all of this. So, in gender balance, off we go, girls. Whoever wants to go first there, to comment.
Yeah, in terms of the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Yeah, sorry. Stacey or Kellie-anne, who wants to go first there? I mean, Stacey has frozen again, it appears.
Are you sure?
Every time you ask Stacey a question, I mean, she just pauses. Are you back, Stacey? No. Kellie-anne, do you want to go first to see if Stacey can? Look,
yeah.
They don't pay their internet bill on the Shankill. Obviously, there's a difficulty there. If they pay the bill, we'll get it back on. Go ahead, Kellie-anne.
Well, I mean, I was just saying, we looked at the results, and again, I don't think, where I live, it's no surprise at all. 89.5% support collapse in the Northern Ireland Assembly. I just don't know what we put in the place of it. I don't have those answers. But you have to say that this is a major majority, and it's all what the survey has done is just confirm everything that Loyalists have been crying out for months about. And I love seeing it in black and white and having that confirmation.
Yeah, well done to these guys for your work. Stacey, are you back with us? No, seems to. Well, we'll hopefully get Stacey to comment on that if she comes back in. But look, as we've been going for quite a while. So just as we're let's round off on my favourite subject of all, the inequitous and poisonous Belfast Agreement. Stacey, you back with us? Yeah.
I think she's faking.
I don't know. Anyway, yeah, Kellie-anne, do you want to say a wee bit just about the findings in terms of the support for the Belfast Agreement, and then Merv, maybe you want to give a bit of an overview on it, and then we'll try.
Again, what was it? 86.5% are anti-agreement, and we vote against it. There's absolutely no surprise there. I don't know anybody. I'm surprised maybe it wasn't higher, because I don't know anybody that is now supporting the agreement. But we'll have to take that into consideration, and we'll have to, be like sheepdogs around this and herd our politicians to where we want to go with it. We have to keep saying it over again and making sure they're under no illusions about how the people out in the street are feeling.
Yeah. Mur, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it is really interesting in terms of Loyalist support for or against. We with voting questions, you'd usually give people an answer, not sure or don't know, but we did try to, deliberately sort of create that dichotomy on the Belfast Agreement and force people into an answer, if you will, whether you're for it or whether you're against it. And the results were quite interesting, but I don't think majorly surprising, in the sense that a majority of the Loyalist community are against the Belfast Agreement. In fact, 87% of Loyalist respondents said they would vote against the Belfast Agreement if they had another opportunity, whereas 14% said they would vote for it. And I think, what we've seen through the Northern Ireland Protocol, in which the Belfast Agreement has largely been used or viewed almost exclusively through the lens of nationalism. In other words, being used as a nationalist or weaponized by the Irish government, by the European Union, by the nationalist community to use against Loyalist interests and Loyalist values, has shifted, if it hadn't already, some people's perspective on the Belfast Agreement, rather than being something that is protective of their identity and of their community, but it's actually a weapon against their identity and of their community. So we saw that also in the fact that the LCC and the Loyalist Communities Council had, published a letter themselves withdrawing support for the Belfast Agreement, which was representative and indicative of, many people within the Loyalist community who were saying that the Belfast Agreement, wasn't what many people signed up to. And I know you would be critical of that from the get-go, that actually this is the inevitable outcome of the Belfast Agreement, but there seems to have been a shift. We haven't got the question that prefixes this, that says, what did you vote prior? What did you vote in 1988? Which would be illuminating as well. But it's clear that the majority, according to this survey, of people are against the Belfast Agreement. And I think, given the way the Belfast Agreement has been used and the commentary around the Belfast Agreement during this political climate, that is confirming what many of us thought that the Loyalist community were feeling.
Yeah, well, look, the Belfast Agreement, obviously the logic is impeccable of anti-agreement unionism now, because the Belfast Agreement is predicated upon the notion that I wouldn't want to miss this contribution. The Belfast Agreement is predicated on the notion that unionism must give and nationalism must get. And actually, the argument that it offers any protection for the union has been absolutely washed away by Mr. Justice Colton, even though I think Justice Colton was wrong. But nevertheless, the notion that the principle of consent wouldn't even protect against the fundamental change to the substance of the union demonstrates that actually I steal from John Larkin QC here, but you can change everything but the last thing. If that's right, and it clearly is right, then by the time you get to the last thing, it's of no value because everything else has already been dismantled when you get there. So, it's no surprise that the Unionist and the Loyalist community are waking up to the fact that the Belfast Agreement is actually a deceptive snare designed to end the union. But look, we've had a good 40 minutes at it there. Is there anything else? Unfortunately, Stacey's connection has dropped in and out, which is disappointing because, you know, Stacey had a vital contribution to make there. So hopefully we'll pick that up in a couple of weeks with Stacey again going forward. But is there anything else that you guys, as two of the co-authors of the report, want to add or think we've missed? Just to come to a close.
Well, just one thing is that this is exciting, you know, in terms of this Loyalist engagement survey. I see this not as the end of a project, but the beginning of one, one that hopefully will be repeated time and time again. And as the more we do it, the more extensive and professional it becomes. So for those who are listening to Unionist Voice, and you know, I would say this is the first of many, hopefully, and Let's Talk Loyalism intends to engage with the Loyalist community on a whole host of issues, whether it be politics, protocol, policing, also education, housing, employment, culture, a whole range of things. So I would say thank you to all the participants who responded in the survey. And I hope those who read it got something from it.
Yeah, Kellie-anne?
No, again, just like Maria said, you know, I'm really excited to see where we go from here, what's next for us, and hopefully I'll get a wee bit better and my nerves will help in the future. You know, I can't bring me into the deep end here today.
You've been absolutely fantastic, and it's the work you've done is brilliant, Kellie-anne. And it's been amazing to see how Let's Talk Loyalism has empowered and encouraged more young voices to come through. And I mean, you need to do more media to give the opportunity possible, especially, you know, yourself and Stacey, Kellie-anne, because there's a big gap there in terms of the representation of female loyalist voices. And actually the challenge here is to create new voices and new platforms. It can't be the same old thing. I mean, for 5-6 years there, it was the same. 3 people all the time, you know,
it's myself. Confidence and things, and getting people. Well, now they have a platform, you know, so we can run with it now a bit better.
So keep working at it, keep contributing publicly. I just in closing want to say, well done to Let's Talk Loyalism. It's a fantastic achievement, and hopefully we'll pick up again soon. And I look forward to continue to work with you in the future. Thank you,
Jamie. Thanks very much for having us.
All right.